Hello, my name is Connor Smith, and welcome back to another episode of Data in the Wild, hosted by Data Meaning. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel below and click the bell to turn on notifications to be the first to know every time we upload a new video. Today we're covering how to build your own parallel block until done tool in Alteryx. Let's get started. A parallel block until done tool comes in very useful when you have a situation with two parallel work streams. You need to control when the end of each of these work streams will be executed and in what order. You can see here in the results window, currently sheet 2 is being written to before sheet 1 is being written. We'd like to change the order. Intuitively, it makes more sense to have sheet 1 being the first sheet here, executed and created before sheet 2 is created. So to accomplish this task, we're going to go ahead and build a parallel block until done macro. I'll create a new workflow here. I'll just use the text input tool as a placeholder for our macro inputs. I'll create this first one that has a field called placeholder. And I'll put the value 1 in here. The values do not matter. We'll add another text input tool below that and also create a field called placeholder. And we'll put the value 2 in here. Again, the values do not matter. I can quickly convert these text input tools into macro inputs by right-clicking and clicking convert to macro input here and right-click convert to macro input here. Now, so that our macros will have anchor abbreviations, we'll click on this and add the anchor abbreviation 1 for our first input and anchor abbreviation 2 for our second input. Our next step is to add a traditional block until done tool. So I'll go to my search bar and search for block. You can see the block until done tool, traditional block until done tool there. I'll connect this to my first macro input tool. And then we can kind of beamline it to the end with a browse tool here, and make sure we connect that to the first anchor output of that block until done tool. Again, we're using the browse tool as a placeholder. You can right click on that and convert that to a macro output as well. And since this is going to be our first macro output, we'll add the anchor abbreviation of 1 there. Go ahead and repeat that step with a browse tool here for our second macro input. We'll just kind of beamline it to the end there as well. Right click on the macro output and convert to macro output here. We'll add the anchor abbreviation of 2. And now we'll get to work on actually building out this parallel process. You can see we pretty much have the same setup as our original use case. Two parallel work streams that we now need to cross over one to the other. Utilizing these parallel block until done tool and an append field tool, we can cross over these two parallel work streams. So I'll go ahead and add an append field tool onto the canvas. Just add it there on the end. And you may wonder, what are we going to append from above? Now, being that it is a macro, any given amount of data may come into this workflow. But that doesn't matter. We're going to make sure there's always a certain field to append. And we can do this by dragging a sample tool onto the canvas and connecting our second output anchor to the sample tool. This sample tool will pull from the data that comes into the first input anchor. It'll pull from the data just one single record. So we'll set first in rows. We'll just pull off the first record. It doesn't really matter. After the sample tool is pulled off the first record for us, we can add a formula tool. This formula tool is going to ensure the existence of our placeholder field. We're just going to set that placeholder field value to 1. Now I know we saw this before. We have a placeholder field coming into the initial macro. But if the data that's being used when the actual macro is being executed does not contain a placeholder value, this formula tool will ensure its existence. Following our formula tool, we can add a select tool to ensure that only the placeholder value will be appended. We'll unselect all other future fields. We can now drag and connect this to our S input anchor of our pin field tool. And in our pin field tool, you can deselect the target and source so that only fields that are not placeholder fields will be included on the second macro output. Okay. With that set up, we can go ahead and save this as a YXMC file. Go ahead and save it as parallel block until done, data in the wild. And then we can test this macro in our original use case. Now you will see there is an error here. Don't worry, when you actually deploy this macro, the error would not materialize. Go to our original use case, right click, insert, macro, add the parallel block until done tool onto the canvas. You can drag and drop that into line there. And then I will have to break this connection to manually reroute it here. Just like that, we can press run. On the output, you can see that sheet 1 is now being created, written to before sheet 2. So we now have a parallel block until done macro that can help us manage our work streams. It's interesting because you can do this as many times as you need to. Right, you just kind of chain them all together. See if I can give you a good example of that. Make this sheet 3 here. So now the way it's built, this first work stream will be executed first, second work stream executed second, third work stream executed third. That wraps up today's video on how to build your own parallel block until done tool in Alteryx. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, please comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to know when future videos are posted. Thank you for watching.